Today, we're going to go through and talk a little bit about if you receive an inheritance and what are some of the strategies and things to think about in that situation and how to best go about it. Let me share my screen here and we'll go through the presentation that I put together for today. So first and foremost, if you are in this situation, it's never a good thing, right, to be receiving an inheritance like this. I mean, someone in the family and someone especially close to you has passed. It's always a tough situation to be in. And I think that kind of plays into the first thing we want to do if you are in this type of situation, receive an inheritance, which is really taking a pause, right? I think it's important to allow time to grieve what you're experiencing. And the financial side of this is it's not going anywhere. We do have some deadlines and you got to make sure you're making progress on the finances and all that. But if we need to take a little bit of time and focus on the emotional side of everything you're going through and then come back to the financial planning side, I think that's the best way to do it. And just make sure we focus on what's most important first. Moving on from there, once you go through that initial phase and you're ready to do the deep dive on the estate planning and handling the assets that you receive or inherit, then we want to understand what did you actually receive from your family member or your parent. There's different types of accounts that you could have received, brokerage accounts, 401ks, IRAs, and property, things of that nature. And they have a lot of different tax rules for each of those different accounts. So we want to make sure that first, what type of accounts did you receive? What's the wrapper on the outside of the account? And then it's also important to know even more of the details on what's happening on the inside, right? Is it all in cash if it's an investment account? Is it invested in individual stocks? So get an idea of what's the makeup of the portfolio as well. So first, just get an idea of what you have to work with. And then lastly, it's important that we want to make sure that you assemble your team, whether it's working with a financial advisor, tax professional, an estate planning attorney, especially if there's a trust setup that's pretty complicated. It's helpful to go through those different pieces and make sure that you're doing everything the right way, as there's a lot of intricacies when it comes to transferring assets after someone passes and making sure you're doing it in the best way possible. So I talked a little bit about the tax implications. And so there's a couple different things that come up on the tax side that we want to keep in mind. The first is the step up in basis. This is one of the best tax laws when it comes to receiving an inheritance. And the reason being is what the step up in basis is that whatever the value of the asset or the account is on the day of the passing, that becomes the new starting price that we use to calculate the taxes that you owe on those assets. For example, if you had, or if your parent or family member had an account and they put 20 grand into an investment account 10 years ago, and that 20 grand turned into $200,000, that 180,000 of gains, that would be a taxable event normally for them if they wanted to take that money out of the account. Once they pass away, whatever the value is on that day in that account, so that 200,000, that becomes your new starting point. So now if that account is at 200,000, maybe it takes a month for you to figure out these accounts and get the money transferred over to you. And after a month, the account balance is now 205,000 and you want to sell these assets. You're only paying the taxes from 200 to 205,000. So you only owe taxes on that last bit of growth that you got after the family member passed away. Everything else you get tax-free. And this works for home values as well and other types of investment accounts. That's a really nice benefit to get that step up in basis. Also, there's estate taxes that we have to be considerate of. These are extremely high numbers right now where there's an actual federal exemption of 14 million per individual. So essentially, if the person who passes away's estate is under 14 million, they don't owe any, there's no estate tax to be paid. So it's pretty easy to fall under this exemption for most people. But if your family member was above the federal exemption, you do end up having to pay a 40% tax on the value of the estate. So it's a big deal if you go over this 14 million per person, because now we owe 40% tax rate on that money. And so then you run into problems about if, let's say it's all properties or most of it's properties, you got to sell a property to pay off the taxes that you owe from that 40% tax rate. So we get into some sticky situations there. But again, most people aren't going to be falling into this category. And definitely if you are above that 14 million for the estate, you're going to want to hire an estate planning attorney. Next is going to be income taxes. So when you inherit a retirement account, you could either inherit a pre-tax account like a traditional IRA or 401k, or you can inherit a Roth account, a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k. Now, if you inherit a pre-tax account, the government has been the silent partner on that account, waiting for the person who passed away to finally take their money out of the account and start paying their taxes on it, right? So they've been waiting a long time to get their tax money, and they're not willing to wait any longer. So what happens is there's different rules, but for the most part, if you're inheriting an IRA from a family member or a parent, you have 10 years to spend down the assets in that account. So you could take all the money and liquidate it right away, or you can wait the 10-year period. If you have money that's in a pre-tax account, you're probably going to want to try and split it up evenly across those 10 years. The reason being is that the pre-tax account, since there's never been taxes paid on that money, you actually get hit with the tax bill on that account. So every dollar that you take out from an inherited IRA, traditional IRA or traditional 401k is going to be $1 of income for you in that year, and you'll have to pay income taxes on that. So we want to defer that or spread it out to lower your tax bill as much as possible. This is why inheriting a Roth IRA and trying to convert your retirement accounts to Roth in retirement for estate planning is hugely beneficial, because although Roth IRAs still have that 10-year requirement to spend down the accounts, you've already paid taxes on that money, so there's no taxes to be owed. So you can take that Roth money out completely tax-free. So most people in that situation, if they don't need the money, they'll sit on that Roth IRA for the whole 10 years, get as much growth as they can, and then they'll liquidate the account and they'll get all that money out tax-free. So next is thinking about your own planning, right? So we thought about the step up in basis, what accounts there are, how they're invested. Now we need to think about our own plan and how do we take all of these assets and put it to use in your financial plan. This hierarchy is what we look at for anyone when we're talking about their financial planning. But first step, we want to look at eliminating any high interest debt. So starting at the bottom here, to me, high interest debt is anything over a 6% interest rate. And the reason why I draw the line there is because you have to think about, if you had $1, are you better off taking that dollar and putting it in the stock market and investing it? Or are you better off taking that dollar and putting it toward a debt that's costing you an interest rate? So that 6% mark is a good sweet spot, because if you want to put your money in the market and you have that 6% rate on your debt, you would have to earn 8% in your portfolio and then have 6% after taxes just to break even. Your investments have to do 8% just to break even with that 6% of paying off the debt. And that's hard to do consistently over time. So typically, if it's under 6%, we can get more value by investing that money and growing the account. Over 6%, we probably want to rush to pay off the debt a bit faster. The next piece is establishing an emergency fund. So most people have this taken care of or have a decent chunk built in savings so far. But if you've fallen behind a little bit, this could be a good opportunity to catch up. Ideally, you want to have 3 to 6 months of expenses that's just sitting in cash and readily available for you. And then once you have taken care of these first two pieces, I would think of those as easy wins, right? The foundation of a financial plan. Now we get to focus on more of the fun stuff, which is how are you growing and investing your accounts? And what are different strategies that we can utilize to move this money into investment accounts that are aligned with your goals now, instead of maybe your parents' goals or family members' goals previously. So one of the options that you have is going to be boosting your retirement plan. And really the way that you could do this is, I see court reporters, they have either like solo 401ks set up, SEP-IRAs, HSAs, and oftentimes they're not fully maximizing these accounts, especially if you have a solo 401k. If you're married, you can put like $120,000 a year into that account. It is pretty rare that I see someone just completely maxing that account out. But if you want to boost your retirement plan and you have money from this inheritance and you have no need for it on your own, that is an option. Is maybe you can't afford to contribute, 100,000 a year to the solo 401k, but you take 100,000 a year from your inheritance accounts that you got and you move that into the solo 401k every year. And that way you're building up your own personal retirement plan and maximizing those accounts, especially if the money that you inherited is just in a regular brokerage account or savings account and it's not getting any tax benefits. We want to move it into an account that is getting tax benefits. And so these are some options that you have to do that. Outside of that, you want to make sure that the portfolio is diversified as well. Oftentimes I'll see that when people inherit accounts, maybe their parents or family member had Apple stock that they bought 15 years ago and never sold it, that they've been sitting on, or they have a bunch of money sitting in cash because they're near end of life and wanted to have a little bit more of an emergency fund for themselves. In those types of scenarios, we want to diversify out of that portfolio and put it in something that's more broad-based, owning thousands of companies. We're not taking as much risk. Also, you want to see is what is the general risk profile of the portfolio. Just because it was invested in the market or in a certain strategy for whoever had the money previously, that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to keep it in the same investment strategy. We want to transition it to align with what your goals are and what you're trying to accomplish. And then lastly, I mentioned maxing out these solo 401ks and SEP-IRAs. If you are over 50, then there's even more wiggle room to do that. Solo 401ks, you can put another $7,500 a year into that as well to max those accounts out. So again, similar strategy here, but just another option is doing the catch-up contribution, taking the money from inherited accounts that may not be that tax favorable, moving it into retirement accounts that are. Another option you could look at is real estate investment opportunities. Now, the first one could be making changes to your primary residence. So you could look at buying your dream home or upgrading your own personal residence with the money that you received. You could also look at paying off or paying down your mortgage so you could hopefully free up that cash flow a little bit sooner. Again, for that, I would go with that same 6% threshold. Most people I see are under 6% for their interest rate on their mortgage. So I probably wouldn't look at rushing to pay it off. But if that's the only thing keeping you up at night, it may be the right place to go. Also, income properties. So when I think about building a retirement plan for a client, one thing I think about is how much fixed income do they have that they're going to receive every single month, no matter what, for the rest of their life. A lot of people only are going to get Social Security. So if we can add like a rental property, that's another stream of income you're going to receive forever. That's helped boosting the retirement plan and making sure that you have guaranteed income sources taken care of. So here we could look at buying an income property and starting to generate some monthly cash flow from that and get some tax benefits. The last option would be a real estate investment trust. This is like a fund that you invest in, and they pool together all the money for everyone who invested in this fund. And they take that money and then they go buy real estate with it. So maybe you're going to get to buy like a commercial real estate building, skyscraper, and you're going to get the benefits of the rental income from that property. So it's a little bit easier because you don't have to manage it on your own, but you're giving up some of the tax benefits that you could receive. And you also have to pay for the people managing the property. And so you're going to lose some money there as well. Lastly is, what would you do if your financial plan is completely on track? So retirement's looking great. You don't need to upgrade your home. You don't want to be a landlord and have a rental property. Maybe we want to think more about creating a legacy and looking at how you could pass this money on to the next generation. So there's different options that you have. Number one is like charitable giving. You can either donate some money to charity. You can also set up a donor advised fund, which is where you take your money and you put it into a donor advised fund and you get the deduction as a charitable contribution this year. So you could get like a $50,000, $100,000 tax deduction this year for your contribution to the charity. But then you don't have to actually give the money to the charity yet. You could spread that out and give it to them over the next 5 years. So it's a way to get a nice big deduction if you needed it in a given year. Also, estate planning is important, whether this is setting up like a trust for yourself, moving the assets that you inherited into a trust account for yourself. You got to get it out of the trust that it was previously in, and having a will in place. It's important to have those estate planning documents. Also, things like life insurance as well. That's another option that people look at for creating a legacy, is you could buy a permanent life insurance plan that's guaranteed to pay out to your beneficiaries, and use inheritance or use money to pay for that insurance policy. And you're building a bigger amount that your family member is going to receive, and they get all that money tax free as well, which is a nice perk. Education funding, whether you want to put money towards 529 plans for your kids, education plans, or if you want to set up like a legacy 529 plan that gets passed on to future generations, you can look at opportunities there. And then lastly, just other family support. So if you had any family members that didn't receive an inheritance, or others that you wanted to provide some money to and support them, you can give them $19,000 a year without having to report that, and just give them some money if they need it. So some of the common mistakes that we want to avoid here. Number one is lifestyle inflation. You get this potentially large influx of capital, and you probably want to go on a vacation and decompress after everything that's happened. But we don't want to just completely increase your lifestyle and start spending this money, because it's not going to be sustainable. So we want to make sure we have a good game plan for how this money is going to affect your life and how you're going to integrate it with your life. Also, not making any emotional decisions, acting based on guilt or pressure. We want to make sure that you have someone that's helping you, whether it's an advisor or just a friend that can look at this and have an outside perspective and make sure you're making the right decisions with the money that you're receiving. Also, you got to be careful of investment scams. People will find out about you receiving an inheritance or that someone in your family passed away, and you may start receiving extra phone calls in regards to this. My rule of thumb is if you hear guaranteed return over 5%, anything that's guaranteed returns that's better than 5%, I would run and stay away. I'd be very cautious of anything that's promising you a guaranteed rate of return, but especially if it's over 5%. And then lastly would be neglecting your estate planning. So like I mentioned, you receive these accounts, they might be in trust accounts. Now we got to move it into your name and move it into your trust accounts, make sure you have a will in place, and pass on that good deed as well, if that was the scenario for you, where you can put accounts into trust so that your beneficiaries will have an easy time distributing your assets and managing that. So we want to make sure that you have good estate planning in place as well. As far as an action plan here, first month, we just want to pause and process everything that's happened, take time to grieve, identify what are those accounts and assets that are out there that you need to figure out, start working with the different banks and advisors and investment firms to get everything organized and get everything transferred into your name. Also assembling your professional team. Who do you want to work with to help you manage this process? Once we get that taken care of in the next few months, you can start to focus on your own planning. What debts am I going to pay off? What am I going to focus on for investment strategy? And also, what are some of the tax issues that I may need to worry about when it comes to this inheritance? Months 4 to 6, once we get that established, start figuring out your long-term plan. If we are going to do something like dripping this money into a 401k or retirement plan over the next few years, making sure that you have that game plan of when you're going to do it and make it systematic, so it's not something that you can change your mind about later. And then also, lastly, is just implementing this game plan and reviewing as needed. We want to make sure we execute a plan and stick to it, and make sure we're moving this money into your financial plan in the most strategic and efficient way possible. So that was everything I wanted to go through today. If you guys do have any questions in regards to this, definitely shoot me a message or put it in the comments on the Facebook group, and I'll be happy to get it answered for you. Of course, I appreciate you watching this presentation. If there's others, court reporters that you think might appreciate this information, definitely share this group, and I'm happy to help anyone who has any questions on financial planning. You can always post any questions in the group as well. Other than that, I'll see you all next week and talk to you soon.